two enemies of the kingdom of light are following Nimrod's master plan to rebuild the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel was supposed to be a structure that would allow man to reach heaven. What they really wanted to do was build a gateway or a portal to different realms. The seed of the serpent is still working on that plan because this is their end game. To do it, they're using technology and sorcery. So in case you missed it, this happened on December 25th. The descendants of Esau are trying to make their nest among the stars. Where are they getting the knowledge to do this? From the kingdom of darkness. They know that they have to finish the job that Nimrod started. Watch this.
This is a great day, not only for America, for our European and Canadian partners, but it's a great day for planet Earth. Thanks to the team. You all have just been incredible. And over 3 decades, you've produced this telescope that is now going to take us back in time. It's a time machine. It's going to take us back to the very beginnings of the universe.
They saw stars and now they need to go there. So, in today's session, we will focus on Nimrod, the founder and builder of Babylon. We're told that it would be called Mystery Babylon in the last days. Was Nimrod Rome's hidden secret and the master builder worshipped in Freemasonry? Let's find out. So in the last session, I mentioned that there were several things that gave me pause as I prepared for this series. And one of those things was Nimrod's genealogy, and the other was finding credible sources to identify him because he's known by so many names. But I believe the information shared in this session will bring some clarity to the confusion and expose Mystery Babylon. So we want to examine the genealogy, the name to see if it was really a title, the symbols identified with him, the gods identified as Nimrod, and we want to see if he is the great architect referred to by Freemasons. Let's get going. Let's begin with Nimrod's genealogy. Let's read this from Genesis 10:6-12. The sons of Ham were Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. The sons of Cush were Seba, Havilah, Sapta, Ramah, and Septica. And the sons of Ramah were Sheba and Dedan. Cush begot Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one on the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh, in the land of Shinar. From that land he went to Assyria and built Nineveh, Rehoboth, Calah, and Resen between Nineveh and Calah. That is the principal city. Notice that it says the beginning of his kingdom. Nowhere has the Most High appointed a king at this point in Earth's history. But let's keep going. I want to hone in on the fact that Nimrod is listed separately from the other sons of Cush. This was puzzling to me as I read over this. And what's interesting is that it reads the same way in 1 Chronicles 1:9-10. So I wanted to know why his name comes after the grandsons of Cush. Could it be that he was conceived in some sort of illicit relationship and therefore was not part of the family? Or maybe he was born much later when the other sons were grown. So I had to do some digging. Let's keep going. So I did some more digging into this because it just seemed odd that Nimrod's name is not listed with the other sons. So this comes from Journal of the Evangelical Theological Society. And he says, Cush sired Nimrod, as another way of saying he begat Nimrod. So he says in Genesis 10:8a, while the verb beget, or to bring forth, most naturally refers to a mother who bears a child, it also is possible for a man to be in view, and thus a father who has sired a son. Therefore, here Cush is said to have sired Nimrod for two reasons. However, Cush should not be viewed as the biological father of Nimrod, and he lists two reasons. Nimrod is not listed among the 5 sons of Cush in Genesis 10:7. What is more, Nimrod is not even listed among the 2 grandsons of Cush. All right, so that made me even more suspicious, so I continued to dig. Let's keep going. All right, so let's continue on with this article. It says, thus Nimrod should be understood only as a remote descendant of Cush, clearly beyond even the possibility of being a grandson, given that Cush's grandsons already are named as sons of one of Cush's sons. So it says, therefore, while Genesis 10:8a focuses the reader's attention on Nimrod as a remote descendant of Cush, the text offers no indication whatsoever as to just how distant of a descendant he is. All right, I'm going to drop down. It says, in Isaiah 29:23, the prophet records the words of God, who states that when he, Jacob, sees his children, they will sanctify my name. Since Isaiah lived 1,000 years after Jacob, there can be no denying that descendants are the children in view, not biological sons or daughters. So that made sense to me when I think about how we say we are the seeds or the sons and daughters of Jacob. We're his descendants. We're not the direct children as in, Levi, Simeon, Joseph, etc. But we are in that lineage. So Jacob is listed as our father. Well, I didn't want to just have one source, so I continue digging. Let's go on. All right, let's look at Eliot's commentary. It says, Cush begat Nimrod. This does not mean that Nimrod was the son of Cush, but only that Cush was his ancestor. Okay, let's look at another source. Let's look at another option, and this comes from Gill's exposition, and he's referencing Sir Walter Raleigh, who thinks that Nimrod was begotten by Cush after his other children had become fathers. So that is certainly an option, that he was born at a much later date, or, as the majority of the sources I found concluded, that he was more than likely a distant descendant of Cush. But you're welcome to search it out. But I want to point out some additional things in this exposition that will connect to the other information about Nimrod. Because remember, we're connecting Cain, Nimrod, and Esau to a place, a people, and a religion. And the majority of these pagan religions are serving the same gods, just using different names. So let's look at some other names used for him. All right, it says in the Greek version, he is called Nimrod, and by Josephus Nimrodus, which is a name of Bacchus. And indeed, Nimrod is the same with the Bacchus of the heathens. For Bacchus is no other than Barcus, the son of Cush. Let's drop down. It says, though the name of Nimrod is usually derived from to rebel, because he was a rebel against God, as is generally said, and because, as Jarkai observes, he caused all the world to rebel against God by the advice he gave to the generation of the division or confusion of languages, the builders of Babel. He seems to be the same with Belus, the founder of Babel and of the Babylonian Empire, whom Diodorus Siculus confounds with Ninus, his son. But one key point I want to hone in on, the word builder. Builder. We're going to look deeper into that, because when you equate builders with architects, it's going to lead us to another group of people we want to talk about. Let's keep going. Let's look at this additional source connecting him with Amraphel. It says, and this is coming from the Bible Encyclopedia, the 1901 Jewish Encyclopedia. It says, according to Rab and Samuel, Amraphel is identical with Nimrod. Some say Amraphel was his real name, and he was called Nimrod, the chief rebel, as leader of the tower builders who led the world unto rebellion. So again, here's a connection to another name. However, if you read Genesis 14, you will find this King Amraphel as well as King Kedorlaomer. These were two of the kings listed. Go back and read that chapter when you get a chance, because it's the story of how Abraham had to fight against these kings who had taken his nephew Lot captive. So all of these names used for Nimrod can cause considerable confusion, particularly when you look at the historical timeline. Some things do not add up. For example, in the book of Jasher, it says Esau killed Nimrod. But then there are other sources that say Shem killed him. Well, which one is it? And that's why I believe that some of the names we read may actually be titles, like Pharaoh or Caesar. Let's keep going. So was Nimrod his actual name? Well, most of the sources say no. And based on this journal article from Journal of the Evangelical Theological Society, the name Nimrod was referring to his character as a rebel. It's saying that the name was a nickname with harsh or negative connotations. And I also highlighted the footnotes from this section. It says Livingston correctly notes that the author chose not to call Nimrod by his own name and honor him, but instead called him by a derisive name that reveals what he truly is. And it's referencing the book Who Was Nimrod, page 69. It says even the name Gilgamesh probably is not the historical name for the king of Uruk, known by this name as Gilgamesh. Likely, it's an epithet, since his name means heroic ancestor. So I'll drop down. It says the ideal example of a dysphonism, and a dysphonism is the opposite of a euphemism, which means a nickname that's given to someone. So it says the ideal example of a dysphonism is the name Babel, which was not the original name of the city of Genesis 11. Instead, this city was called Babel in retrospect, since there God confused or changed the language of all the people based on Genesis 11:9. Thus, the original name of the city should be sought when looking for the site of the tower incident, not the name Babel or Babylon. So let's keep going with this. All right, just one more source, and this comes from Union Theological Seminary, called The Origin and Real Name of Nimrod. It says the figure of the biblical Nimrod has ever attracted the attention of Assyriologists, and numerous have been the attempts to explain the origin and name of this builder of Babel. A number of years ago, the writer became convinced that the name could not be separated from the city of Marad, and that it was an epithet of Lugal Marada, a god worshipped at that place. So he's being called a rebel, as in Esau being called Edom. So I hope that makes sense. Let's keep going. So I want to get back to the symbols associated with him that has been passed down. So we know of the eagle and the lion, but did you know that they had a name for this hybrid eagle lion, and it's called the Anzu bird. It's half eagle and half lion. So this article talks about Anzu, the monstrous lion eagle. The Anzu bird, half lion, half eagle, had been a mainstay of cuneiform culture from at least the 3rd millennium BC. He appears in Sumerian literary works as a wild creature of the mountains. He can also be tamed by the gods as depicted in monumental sculpture. In 9th century Kalhu, he was portrayed doing battle with the warrior god Ninurta at an entrance to the most important shrine of the royal citadel. Layard discovered this sculpture in the mid-19th century and shipped it to the British Museum. For generations, this unnamed dragon or demon captivated the public imagination in many different ways. However, it took over a half-century to rediscover Anzu's true identity. I wanted to show you another view of this Anzu bird because it gives you a good view of it and Nimrod. But do you see what's in Nimrod's hands? The trident. The trident is used to represent the god of the sea, Poseidon. It's supposed to signify domination, and you can find it in Greek, Roman, and Hindu cultures. But also look at what's on his wrists, the solar wheel. You'll find both of those symbols prominently displayed in the Vatican. So let's read the information about this image. It says, in Layard's glossy publication of sculptures from Nimrod and Nineveh, he simply labeled the relief TT, later known as Anzu and Ninurta. Ninurta is another name for Nimrod, as bas reliefs from the entrance to the small temple. The engraving was made by the eminent Ludwig Gruner. So we see several things connected to Nimrod, the hybrid being the lion eagle, and he actually has eagle wings that you can see here, Nimrod. But let's see where else we can find some of these symbols. So look at this image of the cross, and what do you see here? Tridents. Again, look here. What's coming out of the top of this image of what's supposed to be the baby Jesus's head? You can see the tridents here. Now, they also said these are called sun rays to represent the sun god. But where did we see this originate from? Nimrod. Where else can we find this? Let's look. All right, we see on the left, this is a Hittite weather god. Now, look at what's in his hand. You see the trident. Now, they refer to it as a thunderbolt, but we know that it's being used in these other religions or different pagan religions, and they are representative of what Nimrod held in his hand. Where else can you find it? You see here on the right, it's prominently displayed at this mausoleum of Genghis Khan. So yeah, they're worshiping the same god. Now here you see the solar wheel, and this is located at St. Peter's Square in the Vatican, and it is the largest solar wheel in the world. So again, where do these things come from? It originated in Babylon with Nimrod. So these symbols have transitioned from Babylon to Egypt to Greece, Rome, and we still see these symbols prominently displayed today. All right, so this image that you see is normally associated with Osiris, Bacchus, and Nimrod. So let's look at this article from the journal.org, the Babylonian Child in Greece. It's called The Two Babylons. It says, thus much for Egypt coming into Greece. Not only do we find evidence there to the same effect, but increase of that evidence, the god worshipped as a child in the arms of the great mother in Greece under the names of Dionysus or Bacchus or Iacchus is by ancient inquirers expressly identified with the Egyptian Osiris. Let's drop down. It says Orpheus says he introduced from Egypt the greatest part of the mystical ceremonies, the orgies that celebrate the wanderings of Ceres, and the whole fable of the shades below. The rites of Osiris and Bacchus are the same. Those of Isis and Ceres exactly resemble each other, except in the name. Now, as if to identify Bacchus with Nimrod, the leopard tamer. Leopards were employed to draw his car. He himself was represented as clothed with a leopard skin. His priests were attired in the same manner. Let's keep going. All right, pay attention to this image of the woman with the cup in her hand, because we're going to see some connections to her in the Roman Catholic Church. So let's continue on with this article. It says, in the Greek Septuagint, translated in Egypt, the name of Nimrod is Nimrod. Nibros, the name of the fawn, signifies the spotted one. So the article goes on to say, we have evidence that this god, whose emblem was the Nibros, was known as having the very lineage of Nimrod. From Anacreon, we find that a title of Bacchus was Aethiopus, the son of Aethiops. But what was Aethiops? As the Ethiopians were Cushites, so Aethiops was Cush. Says Eusebius, was he from whom came the Ethiopians? The testimony of Josephus is to the same effect. As the father of the Ethiopians, Cush was Aethiops by way of eminence. Therefore, Epiphanius, referring to the extraction of Nimrod, thus speaks, Nimrod the son of Cush, the Aethiop. Now, as Bacchus was the son of Aethiops or Cush, so to the eye he was represented in that character as Nin the son. He was portrayed as a youth or child, and that youth or child was generally depicted with a cup in his hand. That cup to the multitude exhibited him as the god of drunken revelry, and of such revelry in his orgies, no doubt, there was abundance. But yet, after all, the cup was mainly a hieroglyphic, and that of the name of the god. The name of the cup in the sacred language was Cush, and thus the cup in the hand of the youthful Bacchus, the son of Aethiops, showed that he was the young Cush, or son of Cush. So, we're going to continue making this connection, because in the pictures that you will find of the woman with the cup in her hand representing the Catholic Church, They're just changing the names of these deities, but they're worshiping the same gods. Let's keep going. This image represents the harlot that rides on the beast from the sea in Revelation 17. So Babylon sits on the same wicked creature seen ascending from the sea. It was a mixture of the four beasts from Daniel's vision. Now think back to the head of gold. That was Babylon. So the one worshipped in Babylon was Osiris, Bacchus, Nimrod. There are other names, but it's one and the same. Now let's dig a little deeper into this article, The Babylonian Child in Greece. It says, now this god, who was recognized as the scion of Cush, was worshipped under a name which, while appropriate to him in his vulgar character as the god of the vintage, did also describe him as the great fortifier. That name was Bacchus, which in its twofold meaning signified at once the houser of grapes, or the vintage gatherer, and the encompasser with a wall. So I'm going to drop down to this quote by Gesenius, because he's going to refer to Jeremiah 51:53, and he's saying that Bacchus is evidently from the Chaldee Batsar. So he's talking about Jeremiah 51:53, where it says, though Babylon should mount up to heaven, and though she should fortify the height of her strength. Now, who did the Bible talk about when it says he wants to go up to the stars? He wants to build his nest among the stars. Esau. All right, let's get back to this. So it says, yet from me shall spoilers come unto her, saith the Lord. Here is evident reference to the two great elements in Babylon's strength. First, her tower. Secondly, her massive fortifications or encompassing walls. So the article goes on to say, thus from Assyria, Egypt, and Greece, we have cumulative and overwhelming evidence, all conspiring to demonstrate that the child worshipped in the arms of the goddess mother in all these countries in the very same character of Ninus or Nin. The son was Nimrod, the son of Cush. So if you read down in this article, it's going to show that the people revered Nimrod because after the flood, the wild beasts were taking over the land. And Nimrod apparently began to hunt and kill these wild animals. So the other thing that he did, though, was he taught the people to rebel against the Most High. And it was through him that this beast system and paganism began. So what is the source behind it all? Lucifer. He's the first to teach men to rebel. And it began in the Garden of Eden. All right, so let's tie this back to the Roman Catholic Church. This article comes from Ancient Origins, and it says, the Roman god Bacchus as a Christian icon. Before the acceptance of Christianity, Roman polytheism was dominant in the Western world. Rome's borders extended as far west as Britain and as far east as modern-day Greece and Turkey. To help ease the transition to Christianity, the Christians cleverly chose to disguise Jesus in such a way as to hide him from the pagans, blending him into the existing society. And let's just make a note there that this is not talking about the church that the apostles built. This is talking about the pagans that infiltrated and then created this religion. All right, let's go on. It says, By likening his imagery to an already existing Roman god, Christianity found a foothold in the empire while also protecting its followers from religious treason. Bacchus, the Roman god of wine and ecstasy, was the Christians' iconographic choice. Bacchus was the Greco-Roman god associated with mental and physical duality. His mythology began in Greece under the name Dionysus, a foreign god joining an already existing civilization. Dionysus and Bacchus are comparable deities, but for the purpose of this article, Bacchus will be utilized to discuss the pagan god to avoid confusion. So it says, in Euripides' Bacchae, Bacchus came to Greece from a far-off land and shook the Thracian king with his new religious practices and effeminate ways. The Bacchanalia, a procession of satyrs and overly drunken women, led to the king's disapproval of Bacchus's religion, eventually resulting in the death of the Thracian king. Though this particular myth is vastly different from the stories of Jesus, there are similar visual themes the Christians expertly borrowed in their symbolic portrayal of Jesus to aid the Romans in accepting the new religion, allowing it to eventually become the primary faith of the empire. We're talking about the religion created by the Roman Catholic Church. So, let's tie this all in with what we've learned thus far. The church at Corinth, if you remember that Paul talked about them having a lot of issues, it was located in Greece, and it was a major metropolis in the Roman Empire. The city was known for its immorality, drunkenness, the orgies at the private banquets, and it was being tolerated. One of the members of the church in Corinth committed fornication with his father's wife. So Corinth became known for its rampant prostitution. But do you see where this came from? All right, you all, we're going to now connect him to the Masons. And this article is The Historical Origins of Freemasonry. The title is The Legend of Nimrod. It says the universal sentiment of the Masons of the present day is to confer upon Solomon, king of Israel, the honor of being their first Grand Master. But based on this article, it's saying that that title was first bestowed upon Nimrod, the king of Babylonia and Assyria. It says, it has been attributed the first organization of a fraternity of craftsmen to him, in saying that he gave a charge to the workmen whom he sent to assist the king of Nineveh in building his cities. What else? The Tower of Babel. All right, it goes on to say, that is to say, he framed for them a constitution, and in the words of the legend, this was the first time that ever Masons had any charge of his science. So is this what the secret is all about? It says it was the first time that the craft were organized into a fraternity working under a constitution or body of laws, and as Nimrod was the autocratic maker of these laws, it results in a necessary consequence that their first legislator, legislating with dictatorial and unrestricted sovereign power, was also their first Grand Master. Oh boy, let's keep going. And by now you should know if he's connected to the Masons, he's going to be connected to the Roman Catholic Church. So this is an image And it says, well into the 20th century, the British Museum's Nimrod Gallery displayed Ninurta and Anzu as Marduk and Tiamet, adjacent to a restoration of the fish-cloaked figure that had stood with it in the temple. Look closely, and you will spot that it doubles as a cupboard door. So you can see in the background the fish deity that's also representative of Nimrod. So to summarize what we've covered thus far, Nimrod's genealogical background show that he may have been a distant descendant of Cush, beyond the possibility of being a grandson, that his character is defined by his profane behavior, which is where the name Nimrod, meaning rebel, comes from, and that his kingdom began in Shinar or Sumer in southern Babylonia. The symbols associated with Nimrod are the eagle, the lion, leopard, or the god or goddess holding a cup in the right hand. Nimrod, aka, is also known as Nimrut. Some call him Gilgamesh, Sargon, Ningirsu, Ninurta, Osiris, Bacchus, Baal, Adonis, Orion, Mithra, Apollo, Ra, and in the Greek version he's called Nimrod. By Josephus, he's known as Nimrodus, which is a name of Bacchus. So I want to end the session with this chapter from 2nd Baruch 67. And Baruch is being told what's going to happen in the last days. So verse 1, it says, and the 11th black waters you have seen, that is the disaster which has befallen Zion now. Do you think that there is no mourning among the Malachim, talking about the angels, before Yahweh the Mighty One, that Zion is delivered up this way? Behold, the nations rejoice in their hearts, and the multitudes are before their idols, and say, she who has trodden others down for such a long time has been trodden down, and she who has subjugated has been subjugated. So the Gentile nations are bragging because they have taken Zion into captivity. So verse 3 goes on to say, do you think that Yahweh the Most High rejoices in these things, or that his name has been magnified or maligned? But how will it be with his righteous judgment? But after these things, those scattered among the nations will be taken hold of by tribulations and live in shame in every place. It's talking about us, Zion. We have been scattered to the four corners. It says, for so far as Zion has been delivered up and Jerusalem laid waste, the idols in the cities of the nations are happy, and the flavor of the smoke of the incense of the righteous of the Torah has been extinguished everywhere in the region of Zion. Behold, the smoke of the impiety is there. But the king of Babylon will arise. Now, this is a curious prophecy. Listen to this. The king of Babylon will arise, the one who now has destroyed Zion. And he will boast over the people and speak haughtily in his heart before Yahweh the Most High. And he too will fall finally. These are those black waters. Who do you think it's talking about in the 7th verse? Leave it in the comments section. But next time we're going to pick up with Esau, because we want to continue to connect the people to a place and a religion. Join me next time. Shalom, everyone.